So Venezuela's central bank is making the legal claim to try to force the Bank of England to hand over $1.1 billion worth of gold so that the government of Nicolas Maduro can fund its coronavirus response. Now, this claim follows a request that Venezuela made back all the way in April to that bank to sell part of its gold reserves there and send the rest of the United Nations to help with the country's coronavirus fighting efforts. Right now, the Bank of England and the Venezuelan Central Bank, they are not commenting on all of this. But one person that we know who will, former MP George Galloway. George, thanks so much. Great to see you again. So, George, why is this all happening? And why do you think both sides, it's mum's the word for both of them?
Well, Farhan, if I ever come into money, especially if it's gold, remind me not to deposit it in a British bank. It is completely devastating to the security of other people's finances and to the reputation of the Bank of England that a sovereign government with a seat at the United Nations, recognized by the great majority of countries in the world, cannot get its gold back when it asks for it. And so any country still lodging their sovereign wealth in London would be very well advised to find somewhere more dependable to put it. But yes, there is a fair bit of secrecy and mystery around this gold. There were reports last year that the Bank of England had actually allowed Juan Guaido, a rather obscure Venezuelan politician, a kind of backbencher, access to this sovereign wealth on the pretense that he was the legitimate president of Venezuela. Now, you heard Mike Pompeo prattling on earlier in the show about the importance of democracy in Taiwan, but evidently not in Venezuela, where not only has the elected government been de-recognized, but the opposition to the elected government are now reportedly getting access to millions of dollars of the country's sovereign wealth fund. Almost unprecedented in history, and there's a lot of murky history between the North and the South, but I've never seen anything quite like this.
And, it's interesting, George, because, you brought up Juan Guaido, and now we actually have Nicolas Maduro back in power, and actually the Bank of England, or actually, excuse me, Britain doesn't recognize him as the president of Venezuela. So if the Bank of England had the option to take this money from Venezuela, somewhat knowing this, why did they take the money in the first place? And why do you think Venezuela went with the Bank of England? Is there something with the Bank of England that's more, attractive versus anywhere else?
Well, everywhere I go in the world, I find people with a rather overinflated sense of fair play and fair-mindedness in Britain. It's as if they didn't know the history of the British Empire. It's remarkable that Venezuela put its gold in the Bank of England. I can't think of many worse places to put it. And anyone else who's got gold there should get it out very quickly indeed, because when the wind shifts in Washington, it would appear that the so-called independent Bank of England shifts with it. Now, the only way you can resolve this, Farhan, is the United Nations, as the repository of international law, recognizes the Maduro government as the official government of Venezuela and therefore the custodian of the sovereign wealth of the country. And therefore, for a bank in London to refuse to give it to them back is not only, as I said, disastrous for the reputation of London as a financial centre, but it's an actual crime. It is actually theft of another country's sovereign resources.
Now, George, selling off the country's gold reserves has become one of the Maduro administration's only few options that they actually have to raise funds due to U.S. sanctions. Now, the collapse in, you got the oil prices and the coronavirus quarantine that has further hurt Venezuela's already tanking economy. Do you think, in light of this pandemic, the Bank of England could and should make an exception to Venezuela? Will they, do you think?
Well, definitely, yes. I mean, this money is being requested for coronavirus fighting measures. for saving the population, not Maduro, but saving the population of Venezuela from the depredations of a disease which is now laying waste to Brazil, its neighboring country. And for the United States and Britain to be intensifying sanctions on a country that is struggling to cope with the existing sanctions and the coronavirus at the same time. It's really a very big crime, and one that we should be, and I am, absolutely ashamed of.
Well, they're mum's the words, but like I said, you are not mum the word. Thank you so much for your comments today, George. We appreciate you.
No.
Stay safe out of there.